Great. Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining our ICTR Enrichment Seminar Series today. I'm Wanda Fink, the ICTR Director of Operations and your host for this session. We are so pleased to introduce our guest speaker today, Dr. Bradley Marin. Professor Marin is a leading physician scientist recruited to our campus from Brigham and Williams Hospital and Harvard Medical School. He is a Senior Associate Dean for Precision Medicine, as well as the Director of the Pulmonary Hypertension Center. However, it is his key role as the Executive Co-Director of the new University of Maryland Institute for Health Computing, UMIHC, that brings him here today. Before we begin, I was going to tell you to note the survey QR code that's on the screen, but it looks like it disappeared. So I will put that link in the QR chat for you later on. That link will take you to a survey, and we would like you to complete that survey so that we know what future topics you would like for us to bring to you in the future. Also, we plan to reserve the last 10 to 15 minutes or so for questions, so feel free to enter your questions in the chat or Q&A feature. Thank you, and now I am happy to turn your attention to Professor Marin, who will highlight how the UMIHC, a new collaboration among UMB, College Park, and the University of Maryland Medical System, will revolutionize patient care and improve health and well-being for Marylanders. Welcome, Professor Marin.
Well, thank you very much for that kind introduction. I apologize if I inadvertently displaced the QR code, but I know that we will hopefully have time to get back to that. And I wanted to thank also Dr. Davis, who's been a real guiding force for me upon my arrival here at the University of Maryland, and a true supporter of our operations. And it's really a great thrill to be here and to tell the wider group a little bit about the University of Maryland Institute for Health Computing, as well as some of the measures of progress we're starting to see unfold. And without further ado, I'll start by introducing the concept of the UMIHC, which is really a large-scale initiative focusing on data science and computational analytic methods for the purpose of building a learning health system. We'll talk a little bit more about that in greater detail, with the fundamental objective of improving the quality of life and longevity of Maryland citizens, and really becoming a standard bearer for the wider U.S. and how we can integrate data for the purposes of improving outcomes and mitigating the burden of disease. One challenge that we accept at the University of Maryland Institute for Health Computing is how to really accomplish this large and towering task. The use of data science to improve health and wellness, we have deduced, requires at least three fundamental aspects. First, world-class expertise in computer innovation and computational science, a medical infrastructure with a large and diverse patient population, and a robust intellectual ecosystem. And I think that the IHC really encompasses each of these three critical elements. And we'll talk about them in greater detail and specific examples of how we're starting to see those assets come together and form the data science approach that we're taking. So as a little bit of background, the Institute for Health Computing was contemplated and conceived through hard work among Deans Varshney and Gladwin at the University of Maryland College Park and University of Maryland Baltimore, as well as the presidents of the university, as well as Mohan Suntha at the University of Maryland Medical System, and is funded in part by Montgomery County, which has invested in an academic anchor in the region of North Bethesda, which is where I am talking to you today, as well as a matching gift from the University of Maryland Empower Foundation, which unites research enterprises across the College Park and Baltimore campuses. We are also pursuing funding from state and federal opportunities and have already enjoyed a measure of success in those disciplines. So I think that most of the audience here will find this slide somewhat familiar, but I think it's worth reviewing the impressive and vast topology that defines the University of Maryland itself. So I'm here to represent interest from the University of Maryland Baltimore, which of course is home to the graduate schools of health and life sciences, medicine, but also dentistry, social work, nursing, the graduate schools of science, and also the School of Law, which has had some major contributions in the health space in terms of policy. The University of Maryland College Park, led by Sujal Bista, in partnership with Dean Varshney, is an equal stakeholder, of course, and they come to this endeavor with internationally recognized expertise in computer science and in bioinformatics, and have really already begun the process of teaching everyone around them how to approach complex diseases through an analytical lens. They also specialize in unique technologies that probably are underutilized in the health and human disease space, particularly augmented reality and virtual reality. UMMS, led by Warren D'Souza and Mohan Suntha, really provide a critical element for how the Institute for Health Computing separates itself from other large phenotyping and other computational approaches that may be underway in different parts of the country. Because as we'll discuss in greater detail, the network of clinical operations really allows us to address our key mission of health equity, as well as opportunities to leverage the electronic health system for programming contemporary and modern approaches to clinical research studies. So the IHC sits at a convergence point among these three stakeholders, and in this way really allows us to become bigger than any one individual component of this system. Now, the Institute is located, as I mentioned already, in North Bethesda, which is an important consideration because it places our efforts directly and squarely within one of the most fantastic and powerful ecosystems within the health and human disease space worldwide. We share critical proximity and adjacency to not only the National Institutes of Health, which includes the National Cancer Institute, but also the U.S. Food and Drug Administration, as well as the National Institute of Standard and Technology, which taken together allow us to really leverage key resources and interface directly with these federal stakeholders for the purpose of anchoring our mission, but also giving us a chance to amplify our potential when it comes to messaging and when we think a little bit about opportunities in the policy sector of health disease. So we moved in to 6116 Executive Boulevard just after the new year. It's a beautiful, recently renovated grade A commercial space. We're very pleased to be here. We'd love to see interest among University of Maryland community members to visit us and to potentially discuss opportunities for collaboration. And I think one great strength to our property selection, which includes a 27,000 square foot venue, is really how this footprint is naturally enabled for space around incubators, as well as bringing federal institutes, including the NIH, as I mentioned, on site to really facilitate and foster unique collaborations that we think are going to be critical, not only for our mission itself, but also for how we craft and prioritize different projects at the Institute by partnering specifically with people on site. So I mentioned this mainly to bring out the natural opportunities that integrating our Institute members with other stakeholders across the biotech space of the I-270 corridor and other academic partners will be a front and center goal of our wider mission. So this slide here shows in summary form some of the hardware that we're in the process of acquiring and placing at the Institute for Health Computing. These data here were provided by my colleague, Sujal Bista. And I think the point of the matter here is less to discuss the technical advantages, but really more to emphasize the impressive firepower that we will have for general purpose AI and graphical use when we think about what our resources will be at the Institute. And this could be used for a number of different objectives, including structural biology in the protein space, for example, but also for developing AI and machine learning codes that will be important for how we digest big data into their most salient and functional features that has been used and will continue to be used for the purpose of, say, phenotyping complex diseases, or for the purpose of identifying an optimal combination of variables for running a pragmatic trial that we can accomplish on a community level. So the nerve center of the Institute is represented here, and ultimately is going to help fuel the 6-center model for the Institute, which is depicted in this cartoon, identifying key areas of our interest. So certainly applied artificial intelligence, which I think has really penetrated the popular sort of press at this point. And we'll be leveraging those computers that I mentioned on the prior slide, not only to use AI, but also to innovate AI as we move forward during our trajectory at the Institute. We also have a Center for Bioinformatics that aims to optimize sequence recognition and other features that are critical for identifying hidden messages and hidden value within large omics databases. Layering omics to its most functional features is another key objective of bioinformatics. We also, of course, as I mentioned earlier, have an interest in immersive and augmented visualization technologies, which can be deployed in a number of different venues that are important to medical education, as well as reproducing practical scenarios that I think are important for clinical practice, such as surgical scenarios that we know are important and have been proven to advance the state of the art. We also turn to augmented and virtual reality to understand missed opportunities for educating patients that we can potentially capitalize on, especially when we enter into our area of real-world evidence and adaptive clinical trials that has as its most salient objective decentralizing clinical research and really trying to leverage opportunities at a neighborhood level and at an individual patient level as a principal method for improving health equity and generating clinical data that is reflective and indicative of the populations that we serve on the clinical side. And that, of course, overlaps to some degree with the mission of the population and community health effort, which will be focusing on using data science, AI, and bioinformatics to collect and analyze information that is really using forward-thinking methods and ultimately can enable us to be successful as we move forward as a cohort. And therapeutic target discovery is an important component of the Institute. This will allow us to build out early drug development as well as functional biomarker programs that will be important in supporting each of the different centers that you see here. Now, this figure really aims to show the flow of data and the flow of our ideas from left to right, starting with, I think, a finding that's probably obvious to many, but may not penetrate the way we think about data and clinical medicine in the current era. I know that when I set out to help organize this slide, it wasn't intuitive to me, but fact of the matter is that we may be comfortable working within the space of medical records or data from clinical imaging studies. As a physiologist myself in cardiovascular disease, I'm very comfortable with different tests that we order for patients. We also know the potential of omics and the vastness of that analytical space. We are focusing primarily on collecting and organizing data on social determinants of health, as well as environmental factors that are important in understanding transient risk factors that may drive disease. But what's less obvious here is that all of these are collected in an electronic media form, and that allows us to really assemble vast databases that are overlaid on one another, but also serve as the substrate for which next generation computational science, here depicted in the form of network medicine, can be useful for optimizing phenotyping, nuancing the way in which we diagnose diseases, launching anticipatory health initiatives at a very contemporary scale, and of course, ultimately our fundamental objective is to optimize the alignment of a treatment, in this case, potentially a therapy, a pharmacotherapy, but it could be, of course, any other type of treatment, in a way that makes the most sense for efficacy and a reduction in off-target effects for an individual patient. And we can sort of translate that and generalize it into different components of healthcare, whether it be prognosticating patients or diagnosing, as I mentioned. But ultimately, our goal is to generate a more efficient system that's based on integrated approaches to what appear to be somewhat divergent databases, but that is our main objective. So I turn to the University of Maryland Medical System because I think it's very important to acknowledge the power and the robust reach of the clinical operations. This slide shows that there are 22 of 25 counties across the state that are populated by a clinical operation within the UMMS system, which really provides an incredibly unique opportunity to study health issues across a truly diverse patient cohort. And that includes information in urban as well as rural settings, socioeconomic distribution that is defined by great advantage, as well as areas in Maryland that are defined by great disadvantage. It gives us a chance to study questions across topological venues. There are portions of the state that are at sea level, and there are portions of the state that are more close to areas of altitude. So we really have a way to rethink the definition of health equity by including information across all of these different parameters, as well as, of course, considering categorical classifications. As you can see here, about 50% of the cohort is described as Black, 12% is described as Latinx or other. And these are critical considerations, although we do aim to contemporize the way we view race in medicine really through the lens of health equity and thinking more about social determinants of disease and environmental determinants of disease that we think are foundational to advancing progress in this important and critical space. And I'll be talking a little bit more about specifics on this topic. So at the Institute, we focus on shortcomings in the current model of medical care, which requires that sick patients seek out healthcare. We know that that limits access to care to those who are enabled through financial or economic opportunities or geographic opportunities. We know that this favors an imbalance of inequity in health access. We also know that it's imprecise. It's associated with substantial opportunity to improve outcomes. And generally speaking, it's slow and stagnant and costly. And so we want to understand how we can leverage our capabilities to change that, use data science to advance AI and bioinformatics, immersive reality, all of the other skills and opportunities that I mentioned already to improve the way we can deliver healthcare to the patients, to decentralize that process so that barriers to healthcare are no longer as impairing as they are currently. So I think that this slide is meant to provide a little bit of an overview of how we think of project assembly at the Institute. We start with a conceptual phase. We really want to understand how a potential concept can accomplish each of our fundamental goals: building bridges to extramural funding, building potential public-private partnerships, which is well within the strike zone of the mandate by the FDA, as well as a priority listed by our colleagues and funders at Montgomery County. How can we address unmet health needs to tackle and improve health equity? And ultimately, we're aiming to identify projects for whom the impact, or for which the impact, will have a major and transformative change. We then move into a precision phase that's defined by exchange of ideas. How do we think about data science innovation? How can we optimize the method itself that we'll take to address a problem? Is there a good project clinical need fit? How do we make that a good match so that we can expect wins across the board when it comes to methodology and clinical impact and outcome? We also need to acknowledge operational feasibility and ultimately think a little bit about how we would implement any of the findings that we are fortunate enough to generate. And this, of course, brings us into innovation itself and entrepreneurship, which is a major focus of the Institute. But also, can we program pragmatic and adaptive trials through the EHR that test and validate our data? And ultimately, we aim to try to accomplish findings that are in position to change policy. So this is just an early example. This is a true story. It was kind of interesting. Mary Maldarelli, who I've gotten to know quite well, she's a very hardworking pulmonary critical care fellow, approached me early in my arrival at the University of Maryland, sometime about a month after I set foot at Maryland, and asked a very simple question that I thought was very important. Did the Canadian wildfires of June 2023 affect heart-lung health in Maryland? And I thought this might be a very important opportunity, not just for innovation, but trying to galvanize the skill sets and unique resources that already populate the three stakeholders of the IHC, the medical system, the UMCP campus, and University of Maryland, Baltimore. So we thought a little bit about how to operationalize that. We assembled a team, including Amira Sepkoda, who is an environmental epidemiologist, is what I call him, and an atmospheric epidemiologist. Abba Gumel, who is a mathematic modeler that works in predicting health events, as well as Mary and some other team members. And we've already started to address this potential here, focusing first on thinking about how air quality and clinical access can lead to innovation. This is a clear opportunity for NIH grant funding and has the potential to impact policy. So we got together, we thought a little bit about what resources we might need to make this informative and high impact, as well as innovative, and then ultimately consider ways in which outcomes or outputs of these data analyses could be leveraged for anticipating future events, being proactive to deploy resources to at-risk patients, and ultimately prevent disease burden or prevent clinical events. So with that in mind, we built this team, and ultimately we were able to first assemble the heat map that you see here. Now on this map, you can see the week of the day listed on the leftward y-axis, the week of a month listed here on the x-axis, and the years 2018 skipping over 20 and 21 due to COVID, and 22, 22, and 23 listed here. Now the heat map represents the total percentage of Maryland counties that were defined by an average particulate matter concentration of greater than 2.5 micrograms per cubic meter, which is itself identified as a particularly toxic air quality reading. And you can see that we localize our information and our efforts and attention down to 3 specific days in 2 increments in June. This period of 3 days and this period of 3 days, totaling 6 days in June, where at least 25% of counties in Maryland were defined by infiltration of smoke that we thought might be important for predicting health. And then go to validate these data using EPA readings, focusing on the city of Baltimore, where you can see a 5-fold spike in increase in the density of this particulate matter that was both focal and aligned temporally with our information from the more global heat map, providing an important measure of internal consistency. And then turn to Warren D'Souza, Colleen Riley, and many others at the University of Maryland Medical System to help us understand how we can access these data for the purpose of looking into the medical system to understand whether or not there may be important signals here. And this is preliminary data that'll be presented at a national meeting by Mary in May, but demonstrate quite convincingly about a 37 to 38% increase in the number of heart and lung clinical encounters that were experienced during the 6 days of smoke infiltration across Maryland, compared to control days that were identified in the rest of the month of June, as well as in orthologous days to the dates that we were interested in across 2018 and 2019. And we've modeled these data further to understand a little bit about how to geolocalize at-risk patients. We have clear information now on health disparities that seem to define the probability of seeking a health encounter for lung or heart disease during this smoke fire event. And also thinking a little bit about ways we can model strategies to prevent disease burden from being experienced in at-risk patients the next time the air quality changes, which sadly we know it will. In fact, there was just an article yesterday or 2 days ago in the New York Times talking a little bit about projections about wildfire smoke infiltration and how that will continue to be a major transformative driver of disease. Ultimately, we aim to build a business model that allows us to deploy resources in an evidence-based way to different communities across Maryland that's prepared to manage these problems in the future, and then think a little bit about opportunities that may intersect with the world of public health and policy as a way to anchor the findings in some sort of strategy that lives in perpetuity beyond a manuscript or beyond a scientific presentation. So I think that that's one example. We have many other examples of how the Institute for Health Computing will use data science to build a better approach to interfacing with patients in the community. Here, we focus on the evolution really of medicine that was at one point really just focused on sort of a doctor-patient relationship, which is still critical. I'm a practicing clinician myself, but now today thinks a little bit about the robust range of information that's available to guide us, and how do we really manage that? How do we expect our clinicians to interface with a growing range of data? So I'll speak briefly about pulmonary hypertension, which is the disease that I have spent a lot of my research years focusing on. This is a condition defined by elevated blood pressure in the lung artery circuit. Could be considered an ultra-silent killer. There's no way to really get pulmonary hypertension assessed in a routine clinical evaluation. We know it's important for prognosis. We also know it's a complicated disease. There's over 81,000 publications, and that the management of this particular problem has evolved substantially over time. It used to be you would see an internist for this problem. Then you needed to be referred to a lung doctor or a cardiologist. Now you really need not only a lung vascular doctor, but somebody who knows the nuances and the insides and outs of pulmonary hypertension itself. So you can imagine that if this is the case, then there's probably a substantial proportion of patients that are missed who have pulmonary hypertension and present late. And that's, of course, the case. And we can refer back to a famous quote from Michael DeBakey, who was a cardiothoracic surgeon. No physician can diagnose a condition that they never think about. And so we're asking clinicians to manage an incredible range of information without perhaps exposure that they need or even awareness. And so that raises the question, is there a method to capture data that would help short circuit this problem and bridge the delay in diagnosis gap, in this case, for pulmonary hypertension? And we know that there are a lot of standardized medical tests that are ordered for other reasons at high scale, whether it be a 12-lead electrocardiogram or perhaps other forms of cardiac imaging, which in turn may harbor key data that allows us to explore hidden patterns, ultimately driving clinicians towards a diagnosis in a patient that they didn't think about or that they didn't know was even really in play. And ultimately, this can be leveraged to build an automated referral system to a specialist, and in doing so, sort of obviate the expectation that a patient will somehow sort of find their way to the right person just by going through the medical system. So I think this is an example of how the Institute for Health Computing can build into the learning health system model and use data that's already being captured to optimize the trajectory of a patient through what is otherwise a challenging system to navigate. And this shows really the scale and scope of our potential. This, of course, is a map of the state of Maryland, but you'll notice that there is different color codings across different regions. And this color coding reflects the social vulnerability index by territory. The social vulnerability index is a standardized and validated measure that uses information around based on the environment, whether it be housing or access to certain food stores or other key parameters that are important for quantitating health risk. And the state of Maryland is displayed here according to this heat map. So you can just get information around that in and of itself. But what we choose to focus on here is looking at the distribution of patients that are at risk for pulmonary hypertension. And this constitutes 56,000 patients that met the criteria in this overview analysis that was provided in partnership from Warren D'Souza and his group at UMMS. And you can see a number of findings. First, we see a high density of at-risk patients in areas of Maryland that we might expect. And of course, we could go at higher resolution and really get down to the neighborhood level to explore missed opportunities in the way the prevalence and distribution of patients falls out in an analysis like this. But we also learn new information about the distribution and prevalence of this disease, or in this case, patients who are at risk for this disease, by focusing on sort of clusters of patients that we might not necessarily anticipate. And then by taking an objective and standardized approach to integrating information on the social vulnerability index overlaid with where the patients are found, we can identify new couples between clinical prevalence and environmental drivers of disease. And you might imagine that we have other endpoints that we could examine besides the SVI, just looking simply at sort of poverty or, say, stress through violence clustering. There's ways in which we can really expand out the line of information we're using to think about population health, but also to individualize that data to a much more granular scale. So I'll transition to a topic that I know is close to the heart of Dr. Davis and the incredible program that he has built in ICTR, and think a little bit about ways that we may be able to help your objectives and your goals. So I think we'd all agree that clinical trials in medicine really are done a certain way, especially as we get into the phase 2 and 3 domain, which requires a funder or a sponsor that ultimately hunts out different sites based on, say, the robustness of their population, or maybe they know a clinician there that's had a good track record in enrolling patients. And then we launch, the hunt. We really try to find patients that meet these narrow enrollment criteria, see if we can get enough patients involved in the study, and in that way build an experience that's somewhat manufactured. These are phase 3 trials that are occurring in highly controlled circumstances, and we know that this approach is very successful and it's tried and true, but it's also restrictive, it can be disruptive, it's extremely costly, and perhaps more than anything, it's highly centralized. It requires patients to come to the hospital and participate in a trial that they may not be able to participate in, thereby excluding certain subgroups from common participation in studies. And so one potential solution to that, which was advanced by Dean Gladwin and others, is an idea around pragmatic trials. How can we use UMMS, the IHC, and the clinical data repository we have, bring in information about biologics and environmental drivers, and create a more contemporary approach to involving patients in the clinical research? We can accomplish that by programming the study through each of the 15 or greater hospitals within the clinical operations network, and in doing so, be less imposing on workflow, be scalable, be accessible, and most importantly, be a system that can involve patients across the socioeconomic strata so that we can improve our mission on creating clinical research data that is representative of communities at hand. Now, this is our central mission, but it is also the central mission of the greatest policy setters and mouthpieces in medicine today. So you can see here initiatives that focus from the FDA on advancing programs for real-world evidence. There's a number of opinion pieces and a building and accumulating evidence base to talk a little bit about the importance of diversity in clinical trial participation. And the NIH has even dedicated a specific body to advancing the interests and the mission that we're discussing now when it comes to health disparities. So we see an opportunity here to have a geometric impact in this way by bringing together the three stakeholders at the Institute for Health Computing and to deploy this across the spectrum of medical diseases, whether it be cancer, heart disease, trauma, mental health, neurologic syndromes, particularly maternal and fetal wellness, among many others. And so there's no reason why this approach cannot be generalized across the global continuum of medical problems. And I think that as one example that was, for lack of a better word, born out of a conversation I had with the new department chair of OBGYN at the University of Maryland, Baltimore, Irina Bird, we can think a little bit about how to actually begin the process of accomplishing this with success. So in that conversation, she mentioned that preterm birth is a major problem, not only in Baltimore City, but also across the state of Maryland. Here we see the March of Dimes report grade of D+ for our region. And we can see that the preterm birth rate is rising over time, over the last decade. So we also know that this is a problem that asymmetrically affects people of color, and that this is identified as a major initiative and opportunity to improve outcomes that are important for maternal fetal health and to limit preterm birth rates. These are systematically collected data published in JAMA Network Open that also identify a modifiable cause to preterm birth. Here you can see that in this study, that almost 13% of patients that were the parents or the mother, in this case, of a preterm birth had a hypertensive disorder of pregnancy. So they did not experience hypertension before becoming pregnant, but then during the pregnancy developed this important cardiovascular disease, which in turn is identified as a driver of preterm birth. So this enables us to think a little bit about this particular problem in the context of health equity. Again, data published here identifying that people of color are more likely to experience hypertension and complications of hypertension in pregnancy when it relates to preterm birth. But then also to think about how we can use and leverage the electronic health record itself across an entire state to improve recognition and prevention, and to do that through the angle of data science by optimizing the number of risk factors that may not be evident using classical statistic methods, but to use AI or perhaps machine learning to really discover the optimal collection of clinical variables already available in the record itself to rethink the way we risk stratify patients, and to do that in a way that unfolds according to this sort of schematic drawing. And these are project ideas and concepts that have been championed already by Isa Davis, who's a Senior Associate Dean for Community Health, who has worked in the adaptive trial and pragmatic trial space in pregnancy-induced hypertension. She is a colleague. I'm honored to call her friend. She's also an Institute for Health Computing leader. And so we're working to advance this concept where at the Institute for Health Computing, we start with an unmet health need. In the current example, poor perinatal outcomes. We know that pregnancy-induced hypertension is an important but yet modifiable driver of this problem. We aim to partner with different collaborators, whether it be a federal agency through NIH, a foundation such as the American Heart Association, which has a commitment to cardiovascular health of pregnant people, as well as underrepresented and minority cohorts, or perhaps a pharma entity or a biotech entity, ultimately galvanize as much support to amplify our mission, and then launch a data science approach to fixing this problem. Analyze information that's already collected or is being collected prospectively, innovative strategy that improves anticipatory health, prevention of medical problems, build a real world solution in the form of treatment at a community level, and adopt that strategy back into the electronic health system so that ultimately we can live up to our mission of improving health equity. And in this case, testing validated endpoints, healthier babies and mothers, to prove that our methodology is working successfully. So to sort of end the talk, I'll just list a few projects as a flavor. We've made a lot of progress here in each of these, but I talked to you a little bit about the wildfire smoke and cardiopulmonary hospitalizations. We're in the process of building pragmatic trials that improve preterm birth through ESA's work. We're building anticipatory health models through a collaboration that's evolving right now with the NIH and the heart failure section. And we're in the interest of building models that leverage pediatric data to predict early adult onset disease, as well as a number of other really interesting projects that are focused on pediatric cohorts, because importantly, we have, as part of our mission, addressing diseases across the life cycle. So this is an important opportunity that we aim to capitalize on. Had a lot of really great successes already. I'll point your attention to two particular papers, and we're starting to see primary data at the Institute for Health Computing as we speak. So a lot of the publications moving forward will be based on our data collection itself. But this purview includes a transformative perspective piece written by Katie Goodman, who is a JD PhD. She's also a key center member, looking at some of the perils of consideration when thinking about automated tools for diagnosis within the EHR, so an important counterbalancing voice. And then also just had a really great and clinically oriented perspective piece on AI-generated clinical summaries and how large language models should be viewed, and some of the opportunities and limitations there, which was appeared in JAMA, I think, about 2 weeks ago. So we're making a lot of really great progress, and this simply just shows sort of an abstract of the number of different people that we're bringing into the Institute. And with that, I'll sort of end, and if there's time for questions, I'm glad to answer any.
Well, thanks so much, Brad. Really exciting and eloquent description of the concept and the fantastic work you've started to do in the Institute.
Thank you.
If anyone has any questions, you can place that in the chat or the Q&A feature. But also, if you'd like to speak, we can just use the raise hand and we can unmute you so you can have an open discussion.
So, Brad, what are the next 2-3 things that you really want to achieve over the next couple of years?
Yeah, it's a great question. So one of the advantages of working with Isa Davis is her role in the U.S. Preventative Task Force Services, and that mechanism identifies areas for data to change guidelines. And so we're really organizing a strategy that identifies those key areas that we think we can add to in a way that would solidify information needed to levy a decision about recommendations in a particular disease. The second major objective is to launch the Learning Health System in some capacity, which we're already making headway on. And to do that, we want to identify an area of equipoise that we think we're well positioned to address through a pragmatic trial. We want to partner with ICTR and some of the other infrastructure that's already here. I've of course chatted about that already, but really add to the fold what makes us unique, and that's the data science element, the capabilities for bringing in AI and bioinformatics using the computer clusters that we're in the process of acquiring.
Well, since you were highlighting that, it looks like we do have quite a few questions that have been entered into the Q&A feature. So Dr. Marin, would you like me to review those, or would you like to do that yourself?
No, by all means, if you don't mind, I'll take your
excellent.
advice.
So there's a question from Dr. Khanna. How can investigators engage with the center?
That's a great question. So we are building a centralized mechanism for investigators to interface with the Institute. We have a website. It was perhaps launched a little bit early for this particular point. So we're building out a mechanism for people to submit interest, but more importantly, we'll also be posting sort of opportunities and specific projects that are ongoing at the Institute so that people in the community who are interested in a particular project that's ongoing can reach out to the principal investigator and understand a potential fit. I want to emphasize one point, which is that the Montgomery County investment in the Institute has, as part of its objective, expanding the presence of the University of Maryland in the region here in North Bethesda. So one of the areas of emphasis is people coming to the Institute to do work. We're not functioning like a core per se. We're really a collaborative environment. We're building out curricular opportunities. We're building out a regular lecture series. We want people who interface with the Institute to be able to join us on site for the academic and the social opportunities, and to really build the program out from within. And so that's another consideration for those that might be interested, is the capacity to be on site in Bethesda.
So the next question we have, can you expand more on the proposed use of AR and VR?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I have to confess that I'm not the strongest person to answer that. That would certainly fall on Sujal Bista and Dean Varshney. But I can tell you that there are existing examples of collaboration between the AR and VR cohort at College Park and the clinical operations folks at University of Maryland, Baltimore. So Sarah Murthy, who is a trauma surgeon and continues to maintain an active clinical practice in the trauma ICU, has worked together with Doctors Bista and Varshney to build AR/VR technology focusing on pain management, as well as surgical recapitulations that hopefully will be important in training. There are a number of early stage projects that I know they're working on as part of the Institute. So I'm more than glad to put you in touch with them. They probably will be a little bit better positioned to give specific examples of ongoing projects.
So the next question, can you discuss some of the challenges with data ownership and how we would overcome those? What is access to UMMS data currently like? De-identified?
Yeah, this is a great question. So in order to stand up the Institute, there were 4 documents that have been addressed. The first was the lease so that we could move in, but we've also been working on the data use agreement, the tech transfer agreement, and the collaborative agreement. And when it comes to data use, we are at the very, very tail end stage of executing the 3-party agreement that would then enable members of the University of Maryland, Baltimore and University of Maryland, College Park communities to submit proposals and access data that's approved for use by UMMS. The Institute will include a substantial investment into the UMMS infrastructure. So the Institute for Health Computing comes with the budget that I mentioned earlier in the talk, and some of that will be going to help build out the data platform that's used to organize, to compile, and to analyze data on the UMMS side. And so part of that comes with opportunity at the Institute for members that are on site to get access to personnel at UMMS who will be working at the Institute, and also to make sure that those projects have an opportunity for crafting in a way that will be most ideal for the user. So for the investigator, there's a chance to kind of interact there in a way that it may not be possible outside the Institute, just because we're all going to be located in the same space. that's another sort of incentive and motivator to explore projects through the Institute itself.
We have the next question, and one further down, basically similar, and it's about how would faculty at UMB be available to collaborate with the IHC? What would be the process to initiate collaborations?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And, so far I've been able to interact with a number of different investigators that have, approached me, and I'm happy to do the best I can to respond to each. We're going to be funneling most of the project prioritization through the website and in response to RFAs that are launched, at the NIH or some of the other major funding mechanisms. And so I've met a lot of really great people and great investigators. I've tried to be as accommodating as possible for each of these requests, and I am glad to continue doing that. But ultimately, we will also have a centralized mechanism that allows us to prioritize projects and to identify those that we think are strongest for building extramural funding opportunities, building public-private partnerships, and also are strong in terms of feasibility and impact, just like I had mentioned on the slide describing the wildfire project.
So how fast can you talk, Dr. Marin? We have quite a few more here.
Okay.
So this next one is asking, it seems like a great opportunity to address rare diseases with this large amount of data. Can you please comment on this opportunity?
Yeah. So I agree 100%. So orphan and rare diseases is an important priority. In order to address that in a contemporary way, we will need to build out some of the omics-based platforms that we're anticipating and working hard to prospectively develop. Now, those are very early stages, but we also understand the importance of managing that. Now, if the question is a little bit more sort of conceptual, or perhaps addressing a therapeutic target that is important, already known to be important in an orphan disease, we can certainly have discussions around strategies to build that out. But in terms of detection and interacting with patients that have otherwise undiagnosed or rare diseases, that will take a little bit of planning, but that is a major objective for me.
So we have a couple more on the Q&A, and then I want to switch over to the chat just so that I can take these questions in the order that they appeared. So the next one is also from the same person. Are virtual clinical trials part of the effort?
Yeah, so I'm not sure exactly what that question writer references around virtual clinical trials, but my short answer is going to be yes. We're exploring all forms of contemporary clinical trial design, and whether that's adaptive or pragmatic. We are in the process of building mechanisms that can notify study investigators upon arrival of a patient that meets criteria to optimize enrollment and diversify the patient cohorts that are included in research. These are all fundamental goals of the Institute.
This next question is, in addition to increasing healthcare access for patients experiencing health inequity, in what ways do you think data science, AI, and machine learning can help improve the social determinants of health themselves among the people who our health system serves?
It's a great question, and I appreciate that very much. So I think that this is almost sort of an activism question. We want to generate data that provides compelling arguments in favor of change when it's appropriate around the way in which resources are utilized and deployed, and the way in which policy is set. So that data science can illuminate the value of environmental drivers of disease in a way that hasn't quite been done yet. Certainly not at scale that we're capable of addressing across the UMMS system. So I think that we have endless opportunity there. The question is how well we can accomplish that goal for the purpose of exerting change in the way in which budgetary decisions are made, or allocation of resources are made, or quite frankly, the building of new biotech sectors that can help to reroute the way in which environmental drivers of disease are managed. So this is not something that an academic institution can do all on its own, but this is something that the academic institution can serve as the key engine asserting change that affects a great number of people.
This next one is asking about opportunities or training programs available for medical students to be involved either over the summer or through a year out program.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. Sometime around the second week of January, we got a number of requests around summer internships. And quite frankly, we weren't prepared to manage that. We had just moved in, but we have prioritized listing of projects for summer students and summer internships that we are aiming to present publicly on the website within the next 2 to 3 weeks. So we're focusing on that. We're in a state of early building though. And so our expectation is that in a year from now, when it comes to summer internships, we'll probably be better in position to handle wider interest. But we are focused on that. And from a curricular standpoint, we'll be participating in a number of major campus initiatives, including what I understand will be a new biostats PhD program that'll be sort of across both campuses, but certainly at UMB. We want to function as a place to go for practicals so that people can get firsthand experience with research as part of those curricular programs. And we're also building out entrepreneurial catalyst programs that will interface academic and industry leaders in the biotech corridor here to help teach us all about how to position our ideas in a way that might ultimately be commercializable.
The next couple of questions are the same. It's about any current or future planned projects in the cancer space.
Yeah, it's absolutely a critical question. We have a number of different early stage projects with the new Cancer Center Director at the University of Maryland Baltimore campus. He and I are working to start conversations so that we can be in line. We have obvious ideas around AI deployed to, say, chest screening, chest CT data for early detection of cancer, for example. And there are a number of community-based initiatives that are being considered at high scale that we hope the Institute will be part of. So I think we're going to see a lot. We're going to see a much bigger footprint of the IHC in the cancer space as we continue to strengthen that partnership, which is quite early.
This next question is, how is CRISP platform able to enhance, complement your current data platforms, and how do you envision IHC conducting pragmatic trials that extend beyond patient population and in healthy persons?
Yeah, I'm tempted to give this one to Dr. Davis, but I'll try to answer. So I have met with key leaders at CRISP and also have met in alignment with Dr. Davis with the Hilltop Institute to try to diversify the number of databases that we might be able to access as a collective here, both through ICTR and the IHC. We are going to continue our efforts to work with CRISP to understand how we can be a player and a contributor to that enriched database. Doing so will require, I think, building out new partnerships with key members on the UMMS side of the coin, which I have absolutely every confidence we can do. Some of the work that we've been doing just sort of was a priority decision and getting the infrastructure going, getting the data use agreements going. That took a little bit of our focus. And so as we transition away from those tasks onto other ones, will be sure to focus on CRISP and other orthogonal databases that we think will be important.
We have about 4 or 5 more questions. This next one, do you have time, Dr. Marin?
Yeah, I could probably do maybe 2 more.
Okay. Is the IHC planning or integrating other existing clinical databases, for example, Vizient or United Health, into the data?
Yeah, so Rosalina McCoy, who works with Dr. Davis and is the lead of the Population Health Center here, is working to corral the Optum Labs database. She's worked extensively in that space. We have also gotten access to the Premier database, which is an inpatient claims-based database. And as I mentioned, we're in the process of expanding discussions and involvement with Hilltop in alignment with Dr. Davis in terms of opportunities for those resources. So yes, we agree that we want to try to diversify the resources for data analytics as widely as possible.
And another is, how does cloud computing fit into this at all?
Yeah, well, cloud computing is important. This gets to the issue a little bit of resource utilization, cost, and bandwidth. I think that as part of the build out for UMMS and in collaboration with the Chief Innovation Officer at UMB, the mechanism by which people will interact with these databases is through the Azure Microsoft Desktop platform. We've also built a secure research environment that enables working with clinical data in a way that prevents security breaches. And so the cloud is part of that, but these other mechanisms are also foundational to the way in which investigators will interface with the database.
So, thank you, Brad. Absolutely wonderful seminar, and thank you, Wanda. There's even more interest, more questions, and maybe these individuals can reach out either to you, Brad, or if it comes through the ICTR, we will forward it on to you. But it was, I think, just about record attendance, so there was a great bit of interest in your presentations. Thanks so much.
Great, and thank you for the invitation, and always glad to try to address questions. Thank you.
And thank you everyone for attending. Have a great rest of the afternoon.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Dr. Marin.
Bye-bye.